is my buddy's movie, and I gotta be there 100%, and help out and blah blah blah, and it's okay. I'll just come in, and then at the end of that, I was all like, man, I should have just taken advantage of those days off because I was only Monday, Tuesday, and then I had Wednesday off for some weird reason,
Mhm.
or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I had Thursday, Friday, and Saturday off. And I still went in anyway. I went in late that Thursday. Friday I went on time, and Saturday I went on time. But I kind of, in hindsight, if there's ever another movie that I'm on, I'm taking advantage of off days
Yeah. No,
because
I hear you. And
I
and and
I
and and
started to feel it.
and chat, I see you. Yeah, that was my bad. So, first part of this, I already fucked it up. There you go. That's okay. So, yeah, I ended up, really needing the days off that I had because the first day, and I'm not gonna spoil what we did, but it's a well-known fact. I spent the first day of shooting in a trunk, and, my body was not prepared for that. So, I needed the time off to just kinda heal on that and do all that stuff, and, each of the
Mhm.
days, you kinda learn to embrace the hurry up and wait atmosphere of being on a film. It's very much like being in the military or being in a band, anything where you have to wait on
Mm.
someone else to do their job so you can do yours. And
Yeah.
it was about what I expected from that perspective, but man, I know that those of you that are following the movie, crew, holy shit, crew, so good. So good at what they did.
Uh,
You know,
now to touch on what you just said is I've never felt as old as I do until
yep.
I had to do certain things in the movie, and they sound simple. Like you just said, you had to be in a freaking
From
a trunk or the back seat of a car, and then just
We're
being
really
on
chuffed with
my
your
knees,
post,
for
you know what I mean?
example. There was
We're
one day
chuffed, you know
where
what I mean? That's
me,
about it.
Jay, Dodongo, and Billy had to be on our knees. No pun intended or anything, but we had to be on our knees for like majority of the 3 hours of like the first 3 hours. So like that was killer, and
and it wasn't
like
just
you said,
and you
back
guys
of a
just weren't on your
trunk, and
knees. It was freezing cold and misting that day. So you can't
yeah,
move. Your knees down on the pavement and you're freezing. It was the worst day. It was horrible. It was awful.
that easily, like when we watch it on the premiere, whoever's next to me, like sitting, I'll be like, dude, this day right here was easily the
Worst
worst day
day.
shoot.
Yes. Yes. And
So it was,
I did one shot that day in the beginning and then one shot towards the end. And I had you know, uh, Dave and I had the benefit of sunlight for that shot. And then right after that shot, they moved the world a little bit and it went down like 20 degrees in 15 minutes. It was insane. Insane.
you're You're not wrong. And just to the people watching this, what we mean by move the world is um, movies. It's weird because now, ever since we did this, everything I watch, like Walking Dead and
Mm-hmm.
uh, Breaking Bad and everything, I look at it and there's a form to everything. There's always the establishing wide shot where it shows like either the image of the house or who's going to be on the scene, and then it tightens up, and I'm all like, I'm looking at how they establish the world and then rotate it around to show one person's point of view or coverage, and it's like there's so much that went into this. Like I learned very quickly on day one that it was not YouTube. I was like, wow, like because to
Not even
me, I had a
close.
different vision of how everything was gonna go and work through. And about like 2 hours into day one, I was like, wow, I am way out of my element.
Yeah, and I'd been on a movie set before, but that movie was very guerrilla. It was everything was handheld. I didn't see a tripod anywhere. No dolly shots, nothing. It was
Mhm.
very like grab and go. So I was familiar with coverage. I was familiar with having to redo stuff, but the more technology you bring into
Yeah,
it, the better you want the shots to look, the longer the shit takes, you know? So
yeah,
lighting being a certain
and it's
way. Yeah.
and I didn't understand that because, like you said, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. On day one, I'm like, I'm like, dude, what's taking so long? Why don't we just go shoot this real
Right.
quick and get out of here? I didn't realize the camera had to move between every different type of angle or perspective, and then they had to change the lens. And then while they were doing that, the people that were doing the gaffing, like Chris and them, they had to change the lights, and then you had to make sure continuity was in the scene, and then you had to figure out who was where, and then you had to block it. And I was like, wow, like so much went into it because just like you, I have a friend that does movies out of California. His name's Tremaine Hayho, and
Hmm.
he actually he's done about 3 movies, and he does them all guerrilla. As on Amazon Prime is called Rideshare, and it's about a killer Uber driver. And he made that movie for 7,500. So it was literally like him with a fucking
Right.
regular camera and like maybe like a boom mic guy and one guy doing lights, and it wasn't even like equipment that looked even like as expensive as what we had. And I showed him a picture behind the scenes, and he goes, "Dude, you have 4 times the size of a crew that I've ever worked with on a movie." And I was like, "Wow."
And
I didn't
because you
legitimately like, after day one, I was like, "Wow, we're really doing this," and it looks like it freaking like this is a lot of effort and what we have.
like you look at the movies, like you go to the Red website with like this particular camera that was used, and you see all the movies that were shot with the camera. It's insane. And then you add into the mix good lighting, good blocking, good cinematography. Our DP Peter, our DP, if you will, um, just insanely good at getting stuff. Like I don't know how that dude should be in Cirque du Soleil for all the contortionist shit he's got to do to get that camera in position. Oh my god.
Dude, yeah, honestly, I think Peter above. I don't want to discredit anybody else, but Peter easily top 3 most important people that we had on that set. That like, if it wasn't for him, man, I don't think this movie would have been even half as good as what it's like. I'm so glad. We're so lucky we got Peter
Oh
to be the DP. Also, Chris, like Peter and Chris together are like the Steiner brothers, or the Road Warriors,
yes,
or Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, or who else is like an iconic tag team. You know what I mean?
like the
Like those two
Rockers.
together. Yeah, the Rocker, like those two together, and they even told me both that now when they take new gigs, they try to make sure they get the other one to work with because they just go hand in hand, man. And we got very lucky with those two guys just being on board
Yeah,
so much.
and the thing is, it's a 1-2 punch. The crew we got were all like really professional from top to bottom. Whether you're talking about
Mm,
Rudy, Larissa, Christina, Peter,
yeah,
Chris, Robbie, and Alejandro, and the list goes on. All these great people doing sound, lighting, line production, you name it. And on top of being one of the best professional group of people I've ever worked with in any setting, they were amazing to hang out with, which, from what I
yeah.
understand, does not happen on
Mhm.
most movie sets, from what I'm told.
Yeah, there was a little bit of like a feeling out process, like the first 3 days or so, but
Mm-hmm.
after that, man, I felt like I knew Peter, Chris, Rudy, and Christine for like years, man, and I'm still talking to some of them on like just direct messages and
Oh yeah.
stuff, and you know, tweeting at them and stuff. Like this experience alone got so many friends just off of it. It was such a great, that was my thing going in. I was like, you know what, man, if I never do this again, I at least want to have a good time come out of it. Because I gotta admit, I was a little stick in the mud on the about the first 3 or 4 days because I was so stressed about it and nervous and worried about everybody on their A game. But once we all got used to that routine and knew what was expected, and we got past that filling out, it was a lot of fun.
It
Even the
really was.
crappy cold like long nights where you're just like, oh man, I just want to get underneath a blanket and all that. It was so worth it, you know.
And we
And
were all
and
in it
and the
together too.
yeah, and it was funny like how you brought into it saying a lot of hurry up and wait like at the military, because I have a good buddy who's in the reserves, and he tells me he hates having to go in for drill because it's you get there early, you do the inspection with your uniform, and then you're just standing around all day.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I, I remember I made a joke with somebody. I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm in the reserves because
Yep.
we're just we get ready, we get made up, and then we're sitting around for like some days. I literally only did like 20 minutes of shooting, and I was there for 12 hours. So like
Yeah.
it was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I,
you there was days where you had just a quick scene with Dave too. Like I think the first night at the roller skating rink, I think y'all had that outside scene,
yeah. And
and that was like about it.
it took
That was
10
the last
minutes
thing.
getting
Yeah.
deciding how to shoot that, the blocking and making sure we had the tone right took 35 minutes. And then me and Dave went in, one take wonders, and we got it right. And I was like, Billy, I want to try it two other ways. Oh, all right. Well, we got it, but I'm like, I get it, but there's like way more I could do with this. Like, let me try. All right, we have time.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Because but that I think was so interesting because I think Billy as a director went into this assuming he was going to have to work way harder at getting the performances he wanted, and he was so pleasantly
Mm.
surprised by what he got. And but because he was so stressed in making sure we get to the next shot and doing all the things that a director has to do, uh, even when he had time, he felt like he was up against the wall all the time, and that
Oh
had
yeah,
to be really rough for
dude. There were some days that I saw Billy, and I was just like, dude, he looks like
him. Uh-huh.
this guy looks like he has seen some shit or gone through some shit leading up to it. Like he looked like a dead man walking one day when we ran into him. Like we met up with him at the mall, like leading up to it, and I know it was he has like one of the hardest work ethic it comes to putting content together no matter what he's doing, even something as simple as making a graphic or putting a DVD or a Blu-ray together or a cartoon or a T-shirt logo or something like that. Like he's always had a strong work ethic, and I know going into this, um, he was pretty stressed about it, and I think it was just because he takes a huge amount of pride and passion behind what he does, and it was like a an on and off switch because as soon as we wrapped up, man, I literally like I was staring at Billy and I just saw like an imaginary like amount of like a ton of weight just come off of his shoulder like right
Mm-hmm.
there, dude, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
there's Billy at. Like it's been a while. It's been like 2 years, a year and a half since I've seen Billy kind of like seem like he didn't have a weight on his shoulder. Oh
Yeah.
man, I can't wait until the movie's out and I get old Billy back because
Yeah,
you
that's
know
gonna
he,
be choice because there were like a few little quick sparks where I saw it, just like moments
uh,
where he knew things were going the way they were supposed to go, and he was getting better shots than he was expecting. We were on time or we were early, and it was like
uh,
when we were doing one of the setup outside for the campground. I don't want to say where we were. It's in the
mhm,
behind the scenes for Kickstarter backers, and he and I are going back and forth about something, joking on the BTS, and he was
yeah,
so in the moment. I almost forgot that we were shooting behind the scenes for a movie. We were just having a fun conversation. Fucking great, and it
yeah,
was nice to because when I did the audition, I came in. I don't know if you've heard the story or not. The audition kind of came about when I'll tell the rest of you guys here, the podcast audience as well. I moved to DFW kind of on a lark. I'd become friends with Redneck Chris, who's in the Game Chaser circle, and I have some other friends up here
mhm,
from the Destiny community and so forth. And I needed a place to go. The money was going to be about the same whether I stayed down in Houston or came up here, so I decided to just fuck it, come up here and make shit happen. Moved up here, hung out
mhm,
with Chris, and then he had me come up to Retropalooza for the after party, where I met Jay and Billy. They both kind of looked me up and down. I didn't know why. And, we hung out with those guys, talked to them for quite a bit. Next thing I know, I get a DM from Jay. I'm a moderator in his stream. I'm thinking of something about the stream. He says, "Hey, man, I want you to come and audition for this part in the movie." And I said, "All right." I figured some bit part, couple lines, whatever. And I was like, "Cool, sweet." So he tells me where the audition is, tells me the hour the audition is. I go there and decide that I want to be on my game. I show up early and I walk in basically with Billy and Jay, and I sit down and kind of wait my turn. still not knowing what role I'm going to get. And then the first thing Billy says to
Mhm.
me after he says hello was, "Can you help me move this couch?" I said, "Okay, that's how it's going to be." Okay. So it was a ruse. They're going to give me this little bit role if I can help them out with some basic bitch stuff for the audition and for the movie. I have no problem with doing that. I told them I'd do that. So I moved the couch. And then all these actors start filing in. And, they're coming from like casting agencies and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
and then there was like three guys there for the role that I read for, the role of Roy. And I was there first. Billy comes over and asks like the two other people for different roles to go up, and then says to me, "Hey man, you're gonna be here hanging out all day anyway, so we'll just take you when we have a lull." That's cool. I'm like, "That's fine." And I went, "Okay." I wasn't planning on hanging out all day, although I did free my schedule in case, because you do that. It's Billy and Jay.
Yeah.
But it was that moment where I was like, okay, something else is going on. So finally, I go up, do the thing, and I asked him about motivation, like context for the scene, how he wants it played, because I've read it like 5 different ways. And he says, "You're the first person to ask us any of these auditions about something like that." And so I did it. It was
Mhm.
like, "You've got the role, whatever." Then they sprung on me how big the role was. I'm like I said, I was in what 15 of the 13 of the 17 days or whatever, and so it was a big commitment. And they just kind of next thing, like a few days later, I'm on the set of a fucking movie. It's crazy.
Yeah,
And
and it's funny because, like, your role and Chief's role were, like, the 2 hardest to get going because there was like, you were for sure the 2nd person that was casted in your role.
right,
Chiefs was, like, through 3 people before it settled on him, dude.
yeah,
Felt like for a second because Chief was really supposed to Harley, and it felt like that role was never gonna get casted. I was all like, gosh, what's going on? Is this like a cursed role or like what's going on with this role? And then yours too. But honestly, man, you between you and Chief, honestly, I think it worked out in the long run better than it could have ever worked out with y'all two being in those roles. Because I think you hit it out of the park, and I think Chief, who he hit part two. His story is kind of funny too, because oh, and by the way, I know I saw you at the after party at Free Play. I just didn't know who you were at the time yet because I
yeah.
don't
I get
really
it.
watch Chris's thing either. But I remember you were standing in there when kid that nerd came up and told us that Billy Mitchell was cheating or something.
It was good editing
I
on your
remember
part too. It was really good edit
we
too.
were all like, well, actually, he's using emulation and blah blah blah. And we're all just like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like we were still nice enough to the nerd coming up
Right.
to us, and we just let him talk, but same time, hated all of us. So we're just like, yeah, whatever, dude. Uh, but no, like Chief's role was almost similar to. I don't know if you heard how he got casted, but
I did
it was
actually.
literally at the end of Retropalooza when he was packing his stuff away to leave to
Mm-hmm.
go home. Billy's like, "Hey, can you read some lines for me?" And me and Chief kind of like acted them out a little bit. And then like 2 days later, he called Chief and was like, "Hey, we need you to be like 3 weeks." And Chief was like, "I'm not sure if I can." And then last minute, Chief literally went and didn't even read. Like I think he was like with you, where y'all barely saw much of the script,
Right.
and y'all freaking kicked it out of the park, man. I think it went better than it could have, and I would have never had like in the long run, dude. I'm so glad that we had you and Chief instead of anybody else because I don't think the movie meant at all.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure Chief appreciates that too. Because these roles were written with other people in mind. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember seeing like there was a guy that came in for my part, and he was good, but he was such a good actor. And Billy turned to everyone else in the room and said, "This guy's such a good actor. We can put him in anything." And he started throwing roles at him. And he ended up reading for Charlie, and I thought he would have been a really interesting Charlie, but
Uh-huh.
it would have been Eric going off of an actor playing a role. There was no built-in chemistry there, and I think having Chief there
Mm.
really, really pumped it up big time. And he plus, he chiefed it up a lot. Like he spoke because originally
Yeah,
spoilers. If those of you haven't seen the YouTube video that Billy and Jay put out, it was really written for like a nerdy white guy, and Chief is not a nerdy white guy, So he had to go, "Hey,
yeah.
bro, like what's going on?" I can't do a good Chief yet, but
What's
it,
funny about that man is that bless his heart, but honestly, like I knew he was going to do okay, but there was a couple other people who I won't name that were like, dude, he's not going to be able to memorize anything, and they weren't wrong. But we found out quickly we didn't have to memorize anything. We just
right.
kind of had to fill it out and find out how we're going to play the character that we're playing, and then from there it was easy. Like it honestly, like the last week and a half, I didn't even look at my lines anymore. You
But
know,
to
like
that
I just
point,
started.
though, Eric, you came prepared as shit. Like he came in
Yeah,
knowing not just you came in not just knowing your line, you knew everyone else's line, and you were like, no, no, no,
yeah,
no, do it like that. Da, da. But it was because you wanted the movie to be the best thing that it could be, and
yeah.
it was awesome. It's one of those things where you go in expecting one thing, and then what you get is so much better, and then you have
And
this crew who's
yeah,
capturing it,
and I
and it just becomes this great thing.
I had like I didn't mean to be a stick in the mud early on, but I get a lot of that from my work ethic in the wrestling world where we have to, abide by certain, you know what I mean, like I
Hmm.
guess protocol and standards when it comes to how you do a promo, how you come to the ring, how you do certain moves. And like to me, I was thinking more like, A B C D, you got to hit this, you got to have a little bit more emotion, you got to show your face to the camera, you know what I mean, you don't want to be turned, and you know what I mean, you have to have your cover, you have to frame, you kind of have to frame yourself too, even though Peter's doing it. And you kind of, I was like, you got to fake a lot of stuff. I was like, you point where Chief like shoved me. It's like, hey, you don't have to really shove me. We're acting. You know what I mean? If you put your hand behind me and act like you shove me, I could do the
You
rest.
can
And
sell it
I was
exactly.
boss people around, but I knew we all weren't actors as well either. So that terrified me on the low. but
Yeah,
then quickly, like day 4, I got comfortable and was like, you know what? We all have this. We're doing this. So
yeah. I mean,
it definitely was a lot of fun.
what was interesting to me is that we're having this conversation now, and the very first shot of the movie for the actual principal photography, uh, once the whole crew was there, there was some other stuff shot at Retropalooza, but the first everyone's here shot is of you, and then the
Yeah.
second shot is of me and Dave, and I was just like, okay, so we had to kind of set a bar, so to speak, and set a tone. Yeah, I was scared to fucking death, bro. Because you got
Dude,
all these
so was I.
people, because all this money's flowing around, and you're like, man, okay, I've never met
Uh,
Dave before. What am I supposed to do? And we just made it work, and it just every day was okay. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Even
oh
though
yeah.
even on the last day, like there's stuff where it's like you know that every scene exists in a vacuum on those days. And that nervousness never really goes away. You have comfort with the crew. You have comfort that you know what the role is supposed to be. Every single time that camera rolls, there's a little part of your buffalo it just kind of
Oh,
tenses up.
and believe it or not, I am an extremely shy person, dude. That's why like a lot of what I do is usually jokes or shit talking or shock
No.
value. Like I'm honestly like a major shy person. So when I saw how big that crew was on day 1, I was like, oh my god. These guys are gonna get frustrated that we forget our lines. They're gonna get annoyed at us because we can't act. Like, like the whole time I was like, dude. That's why I was kind of like on Jay's ass when the scene on the couch where he's eating the ice cream. I'm like, bro, it's a prop. Don't really chow
Slow
down.
down
And
on
he
the
had
ice cream.
three fucking bowls. I'm like, dude. I'm like, don't push it. I'm like, don't push it. Just take your time and act, and let's get the scene the way it needs to be shot. And ass. And I'm like, dude, I'm just, and I felt bad, for I didn't want to be the I don't want to say I'm Jim Carrey, but I didn't want to be the Jim Carrey on set that people didn't want to work with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or
No, I
get
get
on
it.
everybody. But we came through, and I was shy. You mentioned the first official scene of the movie that we shot. The first unofficial scene we saw was at Retropalooza with
Hmm.
me in it. The first official was with me by myself.
Yes.
That was, I think that was one of the only scenes in the movie where a character besides you were the other one too in the trunk. But my scene with the bathroom and your scene with the trunk,
Hmm.
we were like one of the only two characters that had scenes by ourselves, like
Right.
completely. And for it to be the first one going in cold, like,
Right.
because like they got us right into it. I remember immediately when we got there, like, okay, we need to go over the blocking, and I'm like, what the hell is blocking? And then we went, and they were like, what are you guys gonna be standing? I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Pretend the car's here. We're trying to figure it out. Act through your lines. Go get lobbed up. I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Like,
Right.
like I was like,
And then
I
this
was like
guy,
so lost.
yeah, and this guy Robbie's
Yeah,
like taking this metal dildo and shoving it down your shirt. You're like, what are you doing? No, don't worry about it. Sure.
yeah. Next thing you know, they're like, all right, Eric, we need you to go in the bathroom and sit on the toilet. And I'm like, okay, do I take my underwear now? Do I hide? And then there's like a guy, Peter. I didn't know him. I didn't know
Peter.
Peter yet, but he was sitting on the sink of the bath right in front of me on a
Hmm.
toilet. And then you have Allie right there, the camera assistant. And then you have the boom mic guy in there. And then you have the guy doing the slate. So like I was in a two-person bathroom with like four other
Four or five
people
people, yeah. And
being told, how to do the scene. I had no lines in it, so I was like, "How am I acting?" I didn't know how my character was gonna be yet.
but it all
I
lines
didn't know
up. And to be
which
fair,
role.
like I was watching the playback while you were doing, both takes, and we're all sitting out there like biting our hands because we're laughing so hard at what you were doing. And some of that obviously was a little bit of nervousness too, but we were just,
Yeah,
Rob and I were sitting there, fucking doing this is so funny. Because I don't want to tell you
yeah,
guys what he's doing because I don't want to spoil it, but it was really funny. And when you go in not really having acting experience, and then to see, you know, everything's on the line because all eyes are on this project from a fan perspective of is this going to be any good? Is this going to be a repeat of certain other films that were maybe weren't what the fans were expecting? And although this won't be something that people are necessarily expecting, I think it's going to really pay dividends as far as giving the fans something they didn't even know they want. And
mhm,
to see it come together on those first few shots, there's a big like, oh, okay, okay. So at the end of it, I think that people are going to be like, wow. There's going to be people out there that maybe didn't contribute or didn't contribute a lot initially
mhm,
that are going to come back and go, man, I wish I'd have put more money in there or whatever because they will see that it was worth being a part of it. And it was such a fulfilling experience to have, you know, whether
mhm.
you want to talk about just the professional experience or the gratification of actually doing something like that to the friendship. I mean, you can't measure this stuff. It's amazing. And I'm not saying that to like sprinkle fairy dust on anything or kind of spotlight on anybody. But until you've done it, there really isn't anything else 100% like that, you
You're
know?
not wrong, man. And I think it was a perfect mixture and chemistry amongst everybody on set. Even the people that like had roles that weren't necessarily being on set, like Clint, who was doing all the backups, and Christine, who was always in the, and Larissa, and even like the smaller like people that like Odette, and other people like that. It was just like a perfect mixture of everybody just being on point and believing in the movie and stuff. And I think it's gonna show really good on camera and stuff. And that's all that matters, man. And we're gonna have people that take a dump on it no matter what. But honestly, I don't care because it was something that I'm always gonna remember for the rest of my life.
Same, man. And to kind of put a pin in that because I'm sure we could talk about this all night. But there's been plenty more opportunities to talk about this movie between now when it comes out and well after it comes out. I'm sure. Uh,
Hmm.
this movie it's a road trip movie about kind of the spark uh, in your heart that where collecting comes from, where retro gaming collecting comes from. And
Hmm.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention just the stacks and scads of games behind you. Everyone's got a story. I know you're probably tired of telling this story, but uh, what, when did you first realize that you were a collector, and how did that come about?
Right. So most of my childhood, I only had Nintendo stuff growing up. So my brother had the Master System and the Genesis, and that was like it. He as soon as he got into high school, he was like not a collector anymore, like not a gamer, I would say. Like he would come in and play my stuff, whatever. But me growing up, all I had was Nintendo stuff. So about 2008, 2009, um, the only Nintendo system I didn't have was the NES, which I got rid of that as a kid to get the Super Nintendo because my parents at the time were like, "You can't have both. You gotta trade that one." And luckily, I managed to keep everything from my original Super Nintendo on
Hmm.
because I would play it off like, "Oh, I'll give my younger sister the Super Nintendo so I can have the 64." But then eventually, I took the Super Nintendo back like a year or two later, and I think at the time in 2009, I moved out with my girlfriend at the time, and I just was like, "Damn, I didn't realize I had this many like N64 and Super Nintendo and GameCube stuff." And this was just Nintendo stuff at the time. So I was like, "Wow, I should, really look into," because at the time I was watching early YouTube stuff like AVGN, Irate Gamer, Happy Video Game Nerd, stuff like that. And I was like, man, I always thought it would be cool, to have like a YouTube show and do videos about it. And I wasn't much of a collector at the time until I managed to commandeer my brother's Sega systems. So then I was like, okay, now I have Sega stuff, and then I bought like one show. Funny enough, the stars aligned to where when I started doing videos, I ran into Billy on YouTube, and we started commenting and watching each other's content. And this was before Game Chasers. And one day he was just like, "Hey, dude, we're gonna come into San Antonio, and you want to do a video with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And Game Chasers wasn't even out yet, but they started putting them like, so I was like episode 3, I think. And I think when they came that weekend, they released episode 1. So then I was like, wait, this is what we're going to be doing? Like looking for games? And that thought never really crossed my head. At the time, I was just doing eBay. Like I was just like, oh, I'm going to buy games off eBay. So
Right.
then I went flea market with them. And then that's when the bug started. I was like, yo, you know what? I'm just going to start going to pawn shops and video game stores. And at the time, I would just, anytime I drove past something that looked like it might have games, I would go in there. And then it just slowly progressed to where I'd go to conventions, and then I would go nuts. Like at Retropalooza this year, somebody had like 8 games for $20. I was like, dude, you can't beat that, or 8 games for 15. And I would just go nuts. And for the first few years after I met Billy and Jay, when I'd go to like Portland Retro Gaming Expo or whatever, I would come back with so many games that I couldn't even pack my clothes. So I would wear like all my shirts onto the plane, or I would buy an extra bag or stuff like that. And then it just became like what it is now. And a lot of what I bought, contrary to like popular or like family friends. Like for example, one of my ex girlfriends, her brother passed away, and most of these games just on this shelf right here was his collection. She gave them to me
Hmm.
because he passed away, and she didn't want to sell them off. But for the most part, most of this stuff I bought for myself. I do get fan donations once in a while from like people like Vince and several other people like so many to name right off the top of my head just for my chats and my discords alone, which that's amazing. But now it's getting to the point where I'm like, okay, there's a little too much because I'm having to like stack stuff in front of each other, and I don't even. I'm starting to lose track of what I might have like on PS2, or because the only thing I really pay attention to what I have is NES and Super Nintendo and Switch and certain stuff. But like I couldn't tell you what I have for Atari. I couldn't tell you what I have for Famicom. I couldn't tell you what I have for PS2 or Xbox 360. And it's gotten
Right.
to a point where it's like, okay, sometimes it might be a little too much, at least for where I'm at right now. Cause I do live with my dad who's 80. He's going to be 81 actually in May. Um, and I have everything in my room. But the reason why I'm home is because I was raised, and my parents did this too with their parents. I was raised circle of life type of style to be there for your parents who brought you up and took care of you and stuff like that. Like I'm not here living rent free. I'm not leeching off my dad. I pay the cable bill. I pay the trash bill. I pay
Sure.
the water, electricity. I cook. I get the groceries, I mow the grass, or if I have somebody come do the yard, I pay for that. The house is already paid for. We've lived here that long enough to where, and it's in my name too. My dad's given it to me when he passes away. That's a blessing right there. But I'm here taking care of my dad because he's gonna be 81, and he's been my biggest fan for the longest time. When I started wrestling, actually. I was like 15 years old, and my practices were like at 5 a.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. And my father, on his days off, would drum and go sit and watch me practice at wrestling at 5 a.m. to like 10 a.m. every weekend for like 2 years. He would go out of town with me to my shows, and he's one of my biggest fans. Like he's almost like a staple at most of the shows that I wrestle at. Like everybody in the crowd knows who my father is. And if he's not there, they ask where he's at, if he's okay. Like he's like an old guy that everybody just knows and stuff like that. So he's my biggest fan. Like when I was shooting the movie, he would text me every day and ask me how the movie's going. And to this day he asks about it. So, I can't I got to be there for my father. I couldn't be like what if moved out of the house and he's going down the stairs and he falls and
Right.
hurts his back or something like that. So that's how I was raised. And he's a Vietnam veteran too. I was raised to always respect military vets. And not only did he retire from the military as a senior master sergeant in the Air Force, um, he went to INS and was an immigrations officer for another 20 years after that. So he's retired twice. And I
Right.
don't know anybody that's a harder worker than my dad, even to this day. So, I have the main point, I guess, all that about my dad is that I'm starting to run out of the space. And the arcade one up cabinets that I have like 7 of them. So like now that I'm starting to like almost be caved in, like okay, I gotta figure something out here. But
I mean,
I've loved video games.
you can't tell. You can't tell at all, Eric. So work on that. Now, you say that he's your biggest fan. I'd say that you're his biggest fan too, and that shows a lot, man. Any chance that you got, you were saying good things about your dad and telling us how he was and stuff, and that was awesome. It's
Mm.
great that you're able to, recognize how important parents are to be able to take care of them, and it means a lot to me because, as you know, both my parents are gone. So to be able to see
Yeah,
someone uh, really cherish their parents like that is amazing. So my hat's off to you. Proverbially, I can't take it off. I got a headset on. But
yeah. That's
um,
that's I don't want to talk about biggest fears, man. But there's my dad's been such a big part of my life to where that first day, like I dread that first day that he's not going to be, not to get like emotional or anything like that.
no,
But
I get you, man.
you know,
That um, spoilers. It's gonna suck. Spoilers, gonna suck big time. But you're
and
not there yet.
I've been blessed to have him till he's about 81, and I'm gonna hold on to that.
That's awesome.
So,
It's really
living at, I'm living at home under daddy's roof and all that, but God bless me with a father that is living well beyond, you know, old age and, little things that we do like going to Denny's,
hmm
on the weekends and getting to like hang out and wrestling. Like that's the thing we connect the most on is the wrestling. And that's you can't that's priceless. You got to enjoy that time while you have it.
So, since you mentioned wrestling, I mean, we used to do wrestling commentary. In fact, one of my earliest Twitch streams, I actually got taken down by Twitch because I knew it was against the rules, but I wanted to see how much I could stretch the rules a little bit. So we showed WrestleMania
Hmm.
30 in this little tiny window at the top of the screen, little tiny window, you could barely see it, and there was no sound from the actual show because we knew that if we showed everything, like that's it. But we did commentary over the entire thing. We got through about 2.5 hours of it before they took us down. We had like 4,000 viewers at one point. And then we moved over to
Damn.
Ustream, and then we closed out the show, and then got banned from both those platforms for 24 hours. But you
I
know,
mean, that's not bad punishment.
nah,
24 hours just only.
nah.
That's not bad punishment.
For what it was, absolutely, and it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but it was a lot of fun to do. And it's for me, I think wrestling is one of these interesting industries that it continues to evolve, but also not change. It's interesting in that respect. Indie
Hmm.
wrestling, I think, is getting more interesting than it's really ever been. Um, obviously, you could argue that ECW was independent at the time, and arguably it was, but it had its roots in the main wrestling system. It was a minor min, like an indie major kind of thing. It wasn't what like
Now,
yeah,
like
right,
Impact Wrestling or Ring or
TNA and all that
that
stuff. Yeah,
level.
right. And so now you've got a couple different tiers of stuff, and it it's harder to follow than ever. Oddly enough, even though
Oh
there's
yeah.
it's crazy how many like different because you hear all the talk of the old days with wrestling where uh there's all these different territories. Vince brought them together, and it's amazing. Then you hear the stories about Japan, you hear about European stuff, and looking
Yeah.
back at that stuff, it seems a lot less complex than what you have now, where everyone and their brother. So
Yeah,
like,
that's a territory days. It literally was one promotion for each state, or one promotion for like there was one for Georgia and the Carolinas, and that was it. Like, or at least the main ones. I'm sure there was rogue stuff at the time, but now, man, just like in San Antonio alone, there's at least 8 different companies that I could think of right now.
which is crazy. It to me it mirrors a lot of like the underground music scene, where like with
Oh.
with metal like in Chicago, my guitar player used to always bitch and moan about how there was a show every night of the week. How are you supposed to support everybody and
Mm.
do this thing? And there was no real unification. Do you find that that's similar with the wrestling promotions, where even though people try to be supportive of each other, there's no way to really have that unity that probably should be there?
Mm. I'm gonna be honest. There's there's a lot, even at the lowest level of wrestling that you could think of, like local flea market pro wrestling. There's a lot of interpromotional, like backstage
Oh, B.
fighting.
Oh,
Like imagine you're trying to run a show um, on a month from now, and then you find out there's 3 other shows in the same city that are going to run that day, and then you guys are competing over who you're going to bulk and put on the show, and then it's easy to burn the fans out. You
yeah.
know, like let's say you're a wrestler and you wrestle tonight, right, in San Antonio, and then you're going to be on a different show tomorrow night that's also in San Antonio.
Hmm.
Even on this lower scale, the fans are going to be like, well, I saw Grindhead Jim last night, or why do I need to come to the show the next day? So it's kind of like a weird, like, you don't want to burn yourself out too much either by making yourself too. Yeah. So like, I only wrestle for like one place in San Antonio, one place in Houston, one place in Austin, one place in Dallas. So like, I try to limit myself on that. And then also in the long run, the promoter for whatever company you in takes you a little bit seriously, might give you bigger opportunities, might consider to give you more money because you're doing that favor for them too. But it is a lot like being in a band. My brother's a drummer, and I know some bars would give his band shit if they went and played a show at another bar where they hated the owner at. You see what I'm saying? Like it's
Oh
kind
yeah,
of doing shows at such and such bar. If why don't you do the show for me that weekend here? And you know
it
what I
can
mean?
get
And it's a lot
weird.
of
It can get weird, and it you get to a certain point where, and I think that in music and wrestling, it's very similar. Where once you get with a promoter that you know is going to deliver and they're not going to screw you, and it's a good thing, you tend to stick with those one or two promoters or whatever in each city that you know are not going to screw you up. And
mm,
it's a rough gig to do anything independently, whether we're talking about film or bands or wrestling or what
mhm,
have you. And I think a lot of people tend to confuse fame with success in terms of financial stability, right? You hear about that shit all the time in
yeah,
content creation too. And so when
mm,
you know you get recognized for something you did, whether it was YouTube or Twitch or wrestling or music, it's very gratifying. But at the same time, you're like,
mhm,
well, I still gotta make the donut tomorrow, otherwise my
yeah.
bills aren't paid. And it's a reality that it's 2019 and people still don't understand that. Do you find that frustrating?
Mhm.
Being involved with so many of these kind of endeavors where that's kind of the reality.
Definitely with wrestling, I could say I've never. I'm in the red. I'm beyond in the red with the wrestling. Like
Oh,
that.
sure.
That's an example of being a starving artist who has a passion about doing what they do. And I wish, in hindsight, I would have kept track of every bit of money I've ever made in wrestling because that would have been cool to have like a notebook and be like, "Yo, on this day I made this much, this much, this much, this much," where I could see how much my total has been for like because I started in 2001, so like
Mhm.
I'm coming up on 20 years, like in 2 years. Um, and I've done free shows, which is the worst. I've done
Mhm.
shows for like $5. I've gotten paid 200. I've gotten paid, you know, flights and stuff like that. And it's very much being like a starving artist. I've never had that big break yet. And to me, even though I haven't gotten rich off of it, I haven't been like on WWE or something like that. I still don't say that I'm not successful. I think just going alone and living something that was a dream and doing it for so long and having fun with it and you know getting opportunities like wrestling like Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Jerry Lawler and stuff like that enough to me is being a success. There's shows in the area in Texas that I could wrestle at and people know who I am. I've gotten recognized, as a wrestling and I've even got recognized as 8-Bit Eric in random locations. Like, I'm not making money off of YouTube to where I can make a living off of that. I've never had. I've always had a job of some sort, whether it's, an office job or working at my university. Because I went back to school a couple years ago. I had a job on campus so I could be there studying and going to classes. I've done, substitute teaching. I've done work with YouTube networks where I got to work at home. I did my friend's app and stuff like that. So I've constantly always had something on the side because I've relied just on those two things because I know it's a pipe dream to be like, oh man, I'm going to be a famous pro wrestler one day. But that's not why I've done any of that either. Like, I
Right.
it's a love and a passion for it. But I've seen like what you're saying where there's like a disconnect where people have different, I guess, psychological, I guess, I don't even know what the term would be. Basically, everybody's going to do the same thing you're doing for a different reason and stuff like that. And I kind of never really um, focus too much on what other people are doing, but I have heard people act negative towards stuff that I'm passionate about. Like, I'm probably always going to be involved in wrestling. If I'm not actively wrestling, I'll be a referee. If I'm not a referee, I'll be a promoter. If I'm not a promoter, I'll probably train people to wrestle. I'm always going to be involved with that. Probably just like I'm always going to be involved with gaming somehow. I don't see myself being 50 years old live streaming, but you know,
Well,
if by the
I'm
grace
42 and I
of
don't
God,
plan on stopping anytime soon, so uh, you never
you know
know.
what I mean. not going to be like, oh, this is my living and stuff like that if
Right,
I'm not
right,
doing it now.
right.
You know? And the funny thing about like I mentioned, I got recognized for YouTube. Um, the most random place that I ever got recognized as 8-Bit Eric was at Walt Disney World in line for the Yeti roller coaster. The I don't even know what it's called, the proper term for it, but it's the one at the Animal Kingdom.
Hmm.
I was in line, and this guy was just eyeing me for the longest time. We were like in line for a half hour, and he was just kind of like eyeing me. And then finally, when we're about to go up, he just goes, "Excuse me, I have to ask." He goes, "Are you 8-Bit Eric?" And I go, "Yeah. What's up, man?" And he goes, "Hi, I'm such and such. I'm actually on vacation from the United Kingdom at Walt Disney for Thanksgiving week or wherever it was." And I was like, wow, how much of a chance is that where I'm on vacation and this other person's on vacation, two different countries meeting in a neutral zone, Walt Disney World, one of the most like random places of all time with millions of people going there every day, and two people run into each other that know
That
you know
shared
what I
that
mean? Like
exactly.
who I am,
It's crazy.
this big world of YouTube, like this huge, gigantic world of millions of creators, much more successful than like what I could even dream to be, actual celebrities on it, and one person that was from across the halfway across the world knew who I was. If I'm not even ever going to get rich or anything, I would say that's a measure of success there at
I'd agree with
least.
that too. And
So,
that kind of brings us
you
full circle too,
know,
because
yeah,
Leon, who did our special effects and atmosphere on the movie set, who worked on Maleficent 2 and Game of Thrones and a ton of stuff, even Justice League and stuff like that. He became involved because he's a fan of the show. He's a fan of everyone that does, like all the Game Chaser Circle and stuff. And when he heard the movie was happening, he volunteered his service, spent money out of his own
yeah,
pocket, fly over from the UK and pull up in a hotel and do the thing. And he stuck with it. That guy's amazing too. And it was
dude,
funny because you were mentioning,
beyond worthy. We are beyond not worthy
oh,
to have
right,
a guy like Leon.
it's crazy. And uh, we laugh about like going to conventions and not being able to carry our games and our halls home. Well, that dude had the exact same experience having been in Texas for a month and a half. He ended up having to just throw away clothes to get all the games back, because for him, I imagine it was just a cornucopia of stuff. And I talked to him a couple times last couple weeks, and he's still struggling to like put away all his shit and all this stuff. And we're trying to
Oh
figure out
yeah,
a way to bring him back.
that's also the cool thing about doing this, man, is meeting people like Leon. And I remember we went to were you there one of those nights we went to Denny's or IHOP? Because I know one
No,
of the nights we went and me and Leon were I was hammered. This was the night before I showed up on set with a major hangover.
I remember.
Um,
I remember.
we went to Denny's, and not only did he order a breakfast plate, he ordered a dinner plate, and I did too. I was like, "Screw it, dude," because this was his first time going to Denny's. He never had American style pancakes. He never had scrambled eggs because they don't have
Mhm.
that crap over there. Everything's just completely made different. And I was like, you know, dude, I'm with you on this. If this is gonna be your first time, I'm alongside with you, dude. I'm gonna eat a breakfast plate and a dinner plate. So it was fantastic. It was a great time.
Yeah, we all when we all went up to dinner was that Mexican place in Arlington. I forget the name of it. And then
Oh yeah,
on one of our days off, I think it was the second. Leon and I went to a barbecue place here in Euless, and then we were going to go to a steak, but he wasn't hungry enough. I'm like, I'm not going to have you spend $35 on a steak and you can't finish it. There's
and
no point of that. So we went to this weird. It was like Vietnamese, like French, Chinese fusion place, and I don't recommend it. It was interesting, and the place was well built, and they were nice enough. But it was just like, why? Like, I ordered beef and broccoli, and that part and the rice was fine. But right on top of the bowl, like was an ice cream scoop of corn with mayonnaise in it. And I know that that's a Mexican thing, I was like, which is fine. What's it doing in my beef and broccoli, bro? Like, why is it in there?
Yeah, that's weird that they're mixing different food types together. But yeah, elote is like corn in a cup that usually has mayo, chili powder. Um, but yeah, I could definitely see where I would be turned off from that as well.
I was like, dude.
And
And it wasn't elote though. It wasn't that because it didn't have anything but the mayonnaise. It was just mayonnaise and corn. And you're like, what? Like
oh
what?
yeah, then I
So you
don't.
just kind of roll that off the plate, and we kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, this was a bust. So we ate what we could and left with our tail tucked firmly between our legs. And but with him was always that culinary experience because he was I want to get all the American stuff that I can, all that stuff.
That dude was one of the biggest foodies I've ever met in my life, and I'm
Yeah,
a foodie. Like, he was a foodie. He was taking advantage of being in the United States and seeing what kind of food, especially Texas, that he could eat.
yeah, absolutely. And he was really taken like he told me last week I was watching Thursday night football and he was still up. And I said, "Well, it's on Twitch if you want to watch. We can yip yap about it." He says, "I still don't understand American football, and I don't think I ever will."
I tried to explain it to him at a bar.
That's what he was saying. And I was like, "It's not that complicated. It just sounds complicated because they make a lot of big words for things that he got the ball this far, but he shouldn't have done that one
Yeah.
thing there. So we're going to start over." Like penalties and all that stuff. You know,
Speaking of
and
which, they better not take my QB out tonight because they're winning by a lot.
oh yeah,
That's the worst. Is when your team is winning by a lot and then it's like a blowout and they take the starters out and it's like no, now I'm not going to get any more points today.
right, because they get mad
So
because they're getting taken away, so the defense takes it personally and then tries to break everyone's legs and shit. That's that. I
yeah.
mean, it's fun to watch, but it's no fun for the aftermath. That's for but I this was a lot of fun. So for the sake of the podcast episode part of it, uh, man, thank you so much for being here and really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll do this again, but
Oh yeah,
it's
any
cool to talk about the wide range of shit. And I don't have a lot of guests
yeah.
where I can just kind of go from movie making to wrestling to YouTube to gaming and food and stuff like that. So I'm sure we have a lot more to talk about again. So for those that are listening at home that may not already know this, where can they find you on the internet?
Just 8-bit Eric on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram. Um, what else do I got? Twitter is number one easiest place to get a hold of me. 8-bit Eric on Twitter and on YouTube. Um, I'm gonna be probably streaming a lot more on Twitch like that. But if anybody that's watching this for the first time um, wants to find anything else about me, feel free just to Google 8-bit Eric and you'll see the good and bad about me.
Mostly
I promise
good.
there's more good. There's more good than there is bad.
I mean, you know, my man's a good fucking dude. So check him out, watch his stuff, and you're not going to find anyone much more genuine than Eric. So thanks again for stopping by.
I appreciate that, man.
Here.